Okay, so anyone have anything they'd like to share this morning or comment on or ask any questions? And I'm just kind of also curious how everyone's Dantian breathing was uh, this morning. And so if anyone has anything that they'd like to share, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to share two things real quick. One was I mentioned the other day that I felt like my pelvis for the first time kind of like moving, like opening. And today during the practice, it was really crazy. I was like, wow, this thing is so intelligent and I had no idea. And like I felt my pelvis wanting to do all these different things and like move in all these different directions. And it's kind of like reality went from like one dimensional to like three-dimensional with it. And it was just really, really surprising how nuanced its movements wanted to be. And before, it wasn't really moving, or it didn't feel like I didn't feel it moving. I know it was moving, but it didn't feel like it was moving at all. And just to see how much it wanted to do and how nuanced it wanted to be, and just how much intelligence there was that I hadn't been aware of at all, was just really surprising. And as I felt that, it helped me feel the same thing with my chest and my head and neck. And I was, oh man, these things are like they're so intelligent, and they want to move in so many different ways. And I just hadn't been aware of it. And I'd felt the three dantians more like the energy part of it, but it felt more like, oh, this is like physically, it felt like they all wanted to move in relationship with each other. And I know that's the principle and the harmonies and I like, and I knew that intellectually, but to actually experience it was really totally different experience. And it also felt like the pelvis wanted to breathe, which again, it's like, I know that should be the case, but to actually feel that, and that it wanted to, like, it was like breathing and moving in relationship with the breath was like really, really different experience. So that was the first. And then with the breathing, I really loved what you had us do today. Breathing, doing the dantian breathing through the anus, the perineum area versus the like the Mingmen. And it was really interesting because I felt, like the inner fire texts, like I read talk about like the dripping experience from the centers, and I felt that, but more like something that I was having to intend to happen, or if I would exhale the chi and the breath and the heat up the central column, then it would like make it happen. But doing the dantian breathing today, it felt like just actually holding the breath in the dantian, it wanted to drip down and then drip up, which they talk about like a progression of like first it comes down and then it comes up, but I hadn't really understood that. And then it wanted to do that. It's like from the bottom up, from the perineum up, it wanted to like drip up, which I hadn't experienced. And then kind of through the channels, I wanted to drip. So that was it was really cool to see something that I'd read about and kind of made happen, but not really experienced actually for it to happen kind of on its own. Which again, I know is the principle, but it's totally different thing to experience it. So I just want to thank you for taking us through these things.
Oh, you're welcome. What's the word for it? Yeah, it's a really different experience of kind of theoretically understanding that that's what it does, but actually feeling it and experiencing it, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah, it's one of the key things. My understanding is that it takes a little bit of time for your proprioceptive nerves to like develop to a certain extent where you can experience these things. So I think that's actually one of the reasons why it actually takes a little bit. And so like you actually have to be present. You have to learn to be present, but then the other part of it is that once you learn to be present, you need to actually move the areas enough where it says really registering in your mind or in your brain. So, I feel like that's probably one of the reasons why it takes a little bit of time for people to have these experiences. But once you have these experiences, you know, you're right. It's crazy to what level of nuance um, your body has when it comes to movement. And you know, it's kind of interesting. I was at a dentist some years ago and gotten some work done, and we're talking about how nuanced your jaw was in terms of how it comes down and how it gets used to, and you know that how it affects your bite, and that it wasn't just a straight up and down. And you know, it kind of like clicked. It really clicked for me when we were talking about that, because we don't realize that the joints and the musculature, to what level of nuance our movements have, and we just never actually claim that. We just never have an understanding to what level of nuance it has. And once we start actually getting an understanding of that, the way we perceive and the way we pursue movement, the quality of life really changes, because we start realizing, oh, without this, we're not going to have much of a quality of life, um, because the kind of movement that we have actually directly impacts the, you know, the quality of movement that we have directly impacts the quality of experience we have. And so just naturally we start seeking slower and slower movements, and naturally we start seeking um, actually not being divided. uh, it's actually kind of what leads us to meditation, because we start realizing just naturally, this is a natural progression, that um, you want to only do one thing at a time. And you know, before, I feel like for most people, doing one thing at a time is actually theoretical. It makes sense, like, you know, like all the science says you shouldn't multitask, it's bad for the mind. And I feel actually it's really difficult to slow down until you actually have an experiential uh, understanding that, oh, wow, this makes a huge difference in the quality of my experience. Like, I actually feel whole and connected and good to myself and to the universe. Like, and when I say that, it just kind of, you know, I'm talking about the state where your mind feels calm and quiet, and you feel really good emotionally, um, or like you just feel really present, kind of like as if you're watching a vista, and you just start realizing that actually you don't need to be watching any vista, or you don't need actually any external input. You actually just feel like that simply because you're connected to your breath, and you're connected to the movements of your body, and you're connected to the quality of your attention that is on yourself. And you just start realizing that you're one with your attention and you're one with nature because of that, right? And so I just kind of want to just expound on that. And you know, the other thing that's really interesting is, for some people, actually they experience the opposite of what most people experience, which is, oh, I didn't realize this moved. For some people, they actually experience the opposite. Oh, this moves too much. I feel unstable. And so the people who have actually have hypermobile joints or really loose joints, and they experience life from a place of instability. And once the movements start becoming slowed down, it's kind of interesting. I think this is actually what's fair about life. The solution is actually the same for people who become over-focused, or for people who are not, you know, who become scattered, meaning as in like the people who are too stiff, The movements are, there's not enough movement. And there are some people where there's too much movement. And the solution, ironically, is actually the same: to become present and to actually start moving slow and bring awareness to it. And the people who actually have a lack of stability in their joints start actually from this quiet place realizing, oh, there can be stability in my joints if I just move in a more coordinated way. It was actually one of the things that you were saying about coordination. And ironically, as someone who is inflexible, you start being able to relate to people who are very flexible. And ironically, as someone who is flexible, you start being able to relate to someone who is not flexible, because you start realizing it's actually the same experience. Like, you know, as someone who's not as flexible, you started realizing, oh, wow, they want to move in relation with each other. And that's actually the same experience that someone would have had who doesn't move much, where they realize, oh, the joints want to move with each other. And, you know, it's the same understanding, because that's the same understanding someone would have had who actually has hypermobile joints, and they start finding a stability point. So ironically, the experience becomes in some ways universal, because of the backdrop of coming from spaciousness. So the commonality becomes stillness. And so stillness, all the components become more relevant. And I feel like this is actually one of the reasons why people who become more and more still tend to actually also become more and more present and empathetic. And I feel that's actually one of the reasons why there's a correlation between empathy and actually stillness meditation. And so last, about the dripping, for the audience who's listening in, I just want to say, you know, the dripping experience, it is an interesting experience that actually is experienced a little differently from people. For some people, actually, it feels like this is glowing liquid inside of your body that kind of starts dripping or flowing. And it doesn't feel just energetic, it feels more physical. And it feels literally something is flowing. And so that's the dripping that Shifu Knowing House was just actually sharing. I kind of just wanted to say that because if you just say dripping, it's not very clear what that dripping experience is. And, you know, we're just finding descriptions, approximations for the experiences that we have that happen on the inside of our body. But some people have actually talked about it just from a perspective of kind of like heat spreading in a certain way inside the body, where it kind of feels like lava, and which is actually a slightly different experience, but or like lava dripping, or but there's a definite liquid sensation component to it of like something literally spreading inside the body. And so last, for the exercise, it was not the perineum. It was basically just learning how to breathe from the anus towards the front of the dantian, instead of actually breathing from the front and the back wall, in case you want to try something different. But essentially you do everything the same. You lay down and you place your hands in your dantian, and you bolster behind your knees so that your lower back is laying flat and comfortable on the floor. And while being in this comfortable state, you breathe in through your anus towards the dantian. My teacher, one of my Taoist teachers, used to say, imagine there's a stick that's coming up from the anus, and then it's pushing up on your dantian wall. And so that's kind of like an interesting visual, but it has a very powerful effect. And for some people, it actually works better than actually breathing into your Mingmen towards your dantian. So, okay, I think that's the full commentary and your sharing. So thank you for sharing that, Shifu no else.
Thank you so much. That context, that framework was really helpful. And it really helped me also understand the opposite extreme, what you said about like hypermobile people. That was really helpful. I feel like I could understand that a lot more than I have in the past, and it kind of helped me see it's really the same experience. That was really helpful. And also what you said about proprioception, that really did something for me. I feel like that helped me understand myself and my experience actually a lot better in a way that was surprising. So thank you for sharing all that, Master.
Yeah, it kind of gives more patience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Actually, it's kind of interesting. We actually traditionally, we actually use the analogy of dripping water onto a stone, and that actually never really did anything for me. Because like cultivation is like, you know, like water dripping onto a stone and creating a big hole. Yeah, a groove, And I was like, and then the other analogy that they like using is actually, like a path over time being created in the forest from walking the same groove over and over again. That's the other analogy. And, and then someone said like, well, that's like the grooves being formed in your brain. And that did a little bit more to me, but it still didn't actually do anything for me. But when I came across the proprioception information, I was like, oh, actually, it actually allowed me to become even more present with the actual body, because I realized that my body actually needed to be developed at the sensing level, at the actual like intelligence of my body, where I could actually feel what was going on in my body better. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised. But that's kind of good feedback to hear that. I thought that was actually had a big impact on me because I'm a science guy. And so I love science. And so I thought that, because that's how my brain works, but it's kind of good to hear that it actually has the same impact on someone else.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes the traditional analogy works better for me than the science, but on that one, the science worked a lot better than the traditional one.
Yeah. It really shows that you need actually a diversified model framework, because you don't know what's actually really going to work for someone's mind.
Yes. Thank you, Master Kim.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm actually almost done cleaning here. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share or comment on or ask any questions before you close for today?
I can share a couple of things. I appreciated the new dantian breathing exercise, and was really just feeling like, oh, right, the anus is supposed to be breathing all the time, and it is breathing all the time, but our ideas of breathing really limit that. And I know that the whole body is supposed to be breathing, but it just was very sort of stark to me, like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be happening, but because I've been thinking about breathing centered in my lungs, like that's not really giving enough leeway or spaciousness to the rest of the body to do its thing. So that was one. And then I was also just noticing my thoughts tend to wander more during the tapping and rubbing. So I was curious about that, and just noticing my legs feeling numb. And I've been working with them for a while, to just feel a little bit more. But today it felt like it's sort of like someone who's sleeping and doesn't want to be woken up, that, you know, just like, leave me alone. And feeling that I had bless you.
Thank you.
Had an agenda, like, oh, right, I want to wake them up, you know, and it's like something that I'm doing. And so then just started feeling the numbness, and then had the idea to sync with you, like my legs syncing with your legs, and that somehow they got interested and were like, oh, this is actually a better experience for us than trying to be asleep when someone is, you know, trying to wake us up, or just being asleep in general. So wanted to share that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. You know, I think actually the description that you had later, actually, you know, about like towards the end thing about being woken up experience, I think it's actually really good. You know, the thing we're looking for is the natural experience of waking up.
Mm.
So being forced means that that's not how we're meant to be. So as long as this is actually one of the big things, you know, of cultivation, is that you're not trying to get yourself to do something that you don't naturally do. You're trying to naturally have yourself grow in the area that you're meant to grow. So as long as you're forcing yourself, basically you're insisting on being someone that you're not. So now that's actually different from allowing yourself to develop, like, and adapt to a situation. But even then, you need to actually see how you want to naturally move in that circumstance. And so instead of actually trying to get yourself to do something, it's better to say you need to find a way how you naturally want to move. And the analogy, the better analogy, is that of water flowing. You know, where does the water want to flow? Where do you want to flow? And when we think about building strength, we think about building strength in the natural direction of the flow. And this is wisdom, right? Not forcing yourself to do something, but actually allowing yourself to be. Now, there are times where some force, you know, is required. We're not intelligent enough. And that's like the only thing that can happen in that moment. And, you know, that's kind of like what happens with trauma, right? I mean, like, it's too much to handle for the system. And basically the experience gets stuck in your body or in your system because it didn't know how to handle it. And once you can actually help your system process the information that starts flowing through. But what people don't realize about that is that what that really means is that you're actually allowing the body to find a way to handle the information the way it would have wanted to in that moment if it had known better, right? So to handle all of cultivation from the perspective of what does your system want to do, not what your mind. This is actually where the problem comes, because as long as you follow your mind, you're following a should. And as long as you're following a should, you're basically following someone else's map. You're not following your map. So it's a distinction between someone who is following a map versus someone who is actually in an adventure discovering how the system actually works. And as long as you're following a map, you have an issue, because whose map are you following? Because it's certainly not yours. And so you actually start having a problem. And so that's, you know, it's like as long as you if you have a concept, oh, I'm going to open my body, and you're trying to open it, instead of actually understanding that you're supposed to look at how it wants to open, then basically you're saying the method is more important than my body. The idea that I have that my body should be open is more important than actually seeing how my body wants to open. And that is actually the main discussion, or basically it's kind of like the fight between, if you will, the left brain and the right brain, to be and to control. And actually, there is a place for the left brain because it got created within nature, and the place for the left brain is to create conditions upon what kind of situations you'd like to handle. And then once you're in the container, you need to see how naturally you want to handle it, instead of actually forcing yourself to handle it in a certain way. And so that probably actually kind of addresses, that idea of, or the dilemma. Oh, I'm cultivating. What do I do? And what you do is actually you just follow what your system wants to be in terms of the end goal. So when there's a teaching, especially in Taoism, there's a picture of how the end goal is supposed to look. That's what it's supposed to look when you get there, not actually the in between. And that distinction is really key. That you're not trying to actually control the path. The path is not supposed to look like that at all. The path is actually you just flowing like water and then finding out what it's supposed to feel like. Now, using the same theme, when you're tapping and when you're rubbing, you will actually have more feelings and more thoughts because more energy starts moving through. And actually, it's just allowing yourself to observe those without any kind of evaluation or reaching conclusions, and just letting it take its course. It's almost kind of like curiously looking at how the whole thing unfolds instead of trying to do something about it. Instead of trying to eliminate those thoughts or not have them be there, you actually just notice how they flow like the rivers are flowing, and just allowing them to flow is actually key. And at some point they empty out. Okay. Now I do need to actually get going here because I'm running a little bit late, but that was a great question.
Thank you so
and
much.
great sharing.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Master Kim. That was super helpful.
Oh, welcome. Okay, now you all have a great day of cultivation and have fun following the Tao. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Kim.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Bye.
Welcome. Bye.